Is this a great state or what? Florida, of course. FLA USA. I mean, where could you experience the excitement of a world-famous theme park in the morning, drift down a quiet, secluded river in the afternoon, and catch the sun dropping into the Gulf of Mexico in the evening? Florida, of course.
Where could you come face to face with the most gentle of all sea creatures 1 minute and retreat from the toothy smile of a far more ferocious creature the next? Florida, of course.
Where could you soak up the history of the nation's oldest community and the more recent cradle of the nation's space program, all in the same day? Florida, of course.
Where could you do all of these things and catch a trophy fish, visit a pristine wilderness, dance the night away, wind up on an island way out in the ocean? Florida, of course.
Florida is a state of incredible cultural and environmental diversity, as well as great historical significance.
For visitors and new residents, Florida represents endless possibilities. Things to do, places to explore, more than anyone can accomplish in a short visit to the Sunshine State.
That's why we put together this video tour of Florida, a program which can serve as a souvenir of your real visit to this enchanting state and a planning guide for a future trip. Where to start? How about this? If you were up in the space shuttle looking directly down on the state of Florida, you'd find the center of the state to be right around Orlando. And that's fitting, since the Orlando area is pretty much the hub of tourism in Florida. This is the #1 tourist destination in the United States, has been for years.
Disney started it all back in 1971, transforming a once placid part of the Citrus Belt into something it seems all the world wants to visit. The Magic Kingdom, Epcot, MGM, River Country, Fort Wilderness. And the Disney complex is still expanding. If you have children, they won't allow you to miss this. And there are scores of other attractions throughout the Orlando-Kissimmee area.
Universal Studios, where classic movies have been turned into rides and adventures for all ages. New movie adventures seem to open every year or two. The incredible SeaWorld with its killer whales, sharks, manatees, penguins, and other creatures. It's a park devoted to preservation of endangered species as well as entertainment. SeaWorld puts you closer than you've ever been to a wide variety of sea creatures. And there are scheduled tours behind the scenes where vital research takes place and rescued creatures such as manatees are nursed back to health.
Just down the road, a great place to cool off on a hot summer day. Wet and Wild, an unrivaled water attraction. It's especially alluring in midsummer after steaming in the sun at the major theme parks. From the major attractions on the outskirts, it's just a short hop to downtown Orlando. Why go there, you say? To visit Church Street Station, of course. This is a vast entertainment complex devoted in large part to turn-of-the-century America.
Generally speaking, as we travel Florida, we won't be recommending restaurants or accommodations. The days when motels and restaurants were few and far between in Florida are long gone. In Central Florida and just about everywhere else in the state, you'll find accommodations to fit every budget, from Spartan to elegant, from major chain hotels to rustic inns to economy motels. The same is true of restaurants, where every once in a while you'll want to get away from the tacos and burgers you can get at home and eat where the locals eat. They'll tell you if you just ask.
Having said all that, we will mention one place which combines dining and entertainment. Medieval Times in Kissimmee, just down the road from Disney. Enter the castle, have a photo op with the king, and travel back to the Middle Ages. Dinner, brought by wenches and servants, is eaten the old-fashioned way. fingers and arrives as the show begins. The horses thunder and swords clang as knights of old exhibit their skill at jousting, dueling, and tests of horsemanship.
Thundering hooves and daring knights excite the crowd with tests of skill on the rings, the lance, and the javelin. After this furious warm-up, things really get serious with frightening jousting and sword play. The cheering and the action are non-stop until the final decisive fight to the death.
Apart from the big theme parks, what do kids, and a lot of adults, want to see in Florida? Well, many will say alligators. There are plenty in Kissimmee at Gatorland, which was here long before Disney and the other biggies. Gatorland dates from the days of mom-and-pop roadside attractions and, sadly, is one of the few survivors. Gatorland has changed and grown with the times, and is now as much alligator farm as tourist attraction. There are some shows, such as the Jumperoo, but many visitors are just as fascinated with seeing gators in the wilds of the Gatorland swamp, where the breeding gators live. Every summer, workers risk life and limb collecting eggs from nests guarded by very protected females.
These gals are very protective of their nest, as you can see. Now what we've got to do is run them off and pull the nest apart and pull the eggs out. It's not for the faint of heart.
In order to get at the nest, the female has to be encouraged to move a safe distance away and stay away. So, while one person opens the nest and starts removing the eggs, one or two others stand guard duty. And they have to be ever alert because the female, by now highly agitated, will keep trying to find a route back to the nest. If the gator gets too close, long poles will be used to tap her on her sensitive nose. She'll usually back off for a while.
Yes, it is a little more adventurous than dairy farming or growing soybeans, but just look at what those eggs produce in a matter of weeks. Those with accommodations in the Orlando-Kissimmee area should know that everything Central Florida has to offer is nearby. You won't have to spend half the day on the road. For example, Mount Dora is just a few minutes northwest of Orlando off US 441. Mount Dora is one of those quaint and quiet old Florida towns that seems not to have changed in 50 years. It's a definite change of pace and a great place to prowl for antiques and collectibles.
Just a few miles north of Orlando lies Sanford on the northward flowing St. Johns River. This is one of several places in the region where you can take a leisurely cruise through some lovely countryside. The St. Johns is just a part of the water wonderland that is Central Florida. Lakes and streams abound, providing countless opportunities for swimming, boating, nature study, and possibly catching one of Florida's famed lunker largemouth bass. Less than an hour's drive due east of Orlando, you'll find Cape Canaveral, the Kennedy Space Center, and Spaceport USA. This is where the nation's space program began, and the early years are preserved in fascinating exhibits. Time your visit right, and you might experience the thrill of a real launch.
We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition, and liftoff.
Just a few miles southwest of Orlando, one of Florida's newest attractions, Fantasy of Flight in Polk City, just off I-4. Florida has played a key role in the history of aviation. Much of that history is recreated here in the displays of vintage aircraft dating back to World War I. For young and old, a highlight of Fantasy of Flight is sure to be the chance to experience a realistic World War II dogfight over the Pacific through the magic of computerized flight simulators.
Continue south for another 20 minutes, and you'll arrive at an original Florida attraction, Cypress Gardens. The world-renowned water ski shows and aquacade are still going strong. If you're into gardens, drive a few miles east and take in the Box Singing Tower in Gardens in Lake Wales. The 205-foot tower produces carillon music each hour and a concert every day at 3 p.m.
Now let's venture a little farther afield and head up I-4 toward Daytona Beach. Along the way, you might want to stop at Wekiva Springs State Park, just north of Orlando. It's a great place to cool off on a hot summer day, since the water is always refreshingly cold.
If you're ready for a dip in warmer ocean waters, try one of the world's most famous beaches, Daytona Beach. They once raced cars on this broad strand, and you can still drive on a part of the beach. The beach area is also packed with amusements and eating establishments. Another great place to visit is the vast Tomoka State Park and Wildlife Refuge just west of Daytona. This is wild Florida, where dense forests meet placid bays, a wonderland of estuaries, lagoons, and tidal channels. As we move farther into North Florida on I-95 or US 1, it's time to soak up some history in St. Augustine, the oldest continuously occupied community in the United States. History comes alive at the Castillo de San Marcos National Monument. Local volunteers portray the Spanish guardsmen who served at the fort in the early 1700s. Spending a day in Old St. Augustine is like traveling back in time.
A few miles north and just east of Jacksonville, another important historical site, Fort Caroline National Memorial. This is where in the 1560s the French attempted to colonize Florida but were driven off by Spanish forces. Head west from Jacksonville for about an hour and just off I-10 you'll find White Springs, the Swanee River, and the Stephen Foster Memorial and Cultural Center. Remember Way Down Upon the Swanee River? The song is actually entitled Old Folks at Home. Stephen Foster wrote it even though he'd never set foot in Florida. And 72 years after Foster's death, it became Florida's official state song. Foster's music is played continuously in the center's Carillon Tower. A few miles west on another section of the historic river lies Swanee River State Park. The live oaks and Spanish moss give the visitor the feeling of really being in the Old South.
Farther west and just south of Tallahassee, Wakulla Spring, one of the state's largest, discharges 20 million gallons of water a day. Downstream in this state park, tour boats explore the Wakulla River. This is a great place to get a close-up look at an alligator and view a wide variety of bird life. Since you're in the neighborhood, you might as well visit historic Tallahassee, the state capital. A new high-rise Capitol building opened in 1977, and the old Capitol was restored to its turn-of-the-century appearance and opened as a museum. And the nearby Museum of Florida History traces the state's heritage from prehistoric times to the present through a diverse collection of artifacts.
Continuing west on I-10, just outside Pensacola, we find Fort Pickens on Santa Rosa Island. The fort remained in Union hands during the Civil War, blocking the entrance to Pensacola Harbor. The great Chief Geronimo and his Apache followers were imprisoned here in subsequent years. Doubling back along U.S. Highway 98 past the incredible beaches of the Gulf Coast, you'll come to St. Andrews State Recreation Area where spectacular dunes rise above the beaches. Before heading south along the coast, nature lovers may want to detour inland to Payne's Prairie near Gainesville. The prairie is a vast marsh surrounded by upland woods where wild turkeys dwell. You may also get a look at a rare sandhill crane. The great Seminole chief Osceola spent time here, as did 18th century naturalist William Bartram.
Head back to the coast and just off Highway 19 near Crystal River, you'll find Homosassa Springs State Wildlife Park. The major attraction here is the endangered manatee. This slow-moving, gentle vegetarian is under increasing pressure through loss of habitat, collisions with boats, and other environmental problems. Here, sick and injured manatees have been nursed back to health and protected waters, and many have become permanent residents. This is a great place to learn about manatees since they can be viewed from above and below the water, and rangers provide plenty of information.
We try to keep the contact with the public limited, but we do programs in the water just so people get to realize their personalities, and it's not just a floating blob out there. They do have personalities, and they are kind of special, but we don't have anybody going down there. You know, the people don't go down there and feed them or pat them or anything like that. The idea is to keep it as natural as possible. Then we have the educational program here, too.
They have the same characteristic small eyes and the nails on the bottom of their flippers, just like the elephants have nails on the bottom of their feet. Now this is Amanda right here. Amanda was rescued about 19, 20 years ago after she was hit by a boat. And when she was rescued, she had a baby by her side. Whoops, smiling one back here is a baby. This is Ariel. Of course, Ariel's grown up now, about the same size as Amanda. I introduced you already.
An hour south of Homosassa, you'll go from wilderness Florida to wild Florida. Wild is in the wild rides at famed Busch Gardens. Once a modest animal park adjoining the Busch Brewery, the attraction grew and grew, and today rivals the major attractions in Orlando. The animals are still here, but they've been joined by a whole lot more.
History buffs and cigar aficionados might want to stop in Ybor City near downtown Tampa. Cuban immigrant cigar makers arrived here in the late 1800s and made Ybor City the cigar-making capital of the world for the next 50 years. Their story is told in the vividly colored tiles on the Columbia restaurant and in the Ybor City State Museum in the old Ferlita Bakery building. More of Florida's fascinating history may be found at the DeSoto National Memorial, just west of Bradenton, where the Manatee River empties into Tampa Bay's entrance. This is where Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto is believed to have landed in 1535 to begin his exploration of the New World. Park rangers in period costumes maintain a living history encampment where they tell of de Soto's adventures.
But it was fired by virtue of putting your thumb over the top. This is called the trigger in our language, in modern technology, but they called it a cat's tail. Doesn't it look like a cat's tail? That's what they called it, a cat's tail. You rested this on your shoulder, or you could hold it out in front of you, depending upon the size of it and your strength. Then you sight it over your thumb and down to the tip of the arrow, and if you used it several times, actually, you don't have to be the swiftest person in the world to be able to fire this. I'm not putting Pam down. But you can see that you can hit a target pretty easy. It's very accurate. She'll place the bolt, point the crossbow downrange. The bolt is fletched so that we have a flat surface. Kentucky range. We won't have rabbits through tonight, but we sure will have peace carpet. Thank you, Pam. That was very good. This time, she's going to put that in the serpentine and try it to make sure it goes down into the pan and stays hot at all times. And I have to give you this warning, that if you have hearing aids, if you have small children or you have sensitive ears, you might want to cover them. It's not a loud bang, but it's a bang enough that would hurt your ears if you are sensitive. And the next command when she was ready was, get fire. Uncock your mat. Take down your musket and carry your rest with you. Shoulder your musket. Marching with your musket, carry the rest. You can see these commands.
Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary, farther south and just east of Bonita Springs, is operated by the Audubon Society. The sanctuary is home to an abundance of wildlife. Walk the boardwalk past a prairie and into a cypress swamp, and you're likely to see deer, alligators, and all sorts of birds. This is a nesting area for the endangered wood stork, called an ironhead by old-timers. When water depths are just right and the storks produce offspring, the noise made by hungry chicks is incredible. Amid the herons, egrets, and ibis, you may also spot a limpkin, a wading bird that usually stays out of sight deep in the swamps. If you're at Corkscrew in the springtime, and you're really lucky, you might see a mother limpkin creating noisy diversions to protect her chick from a hungry gator.
Back in Bonita Springs, the Everglades Wonder Gardens is well worth a visit. the oldest Southwest Florida attraction. The Wonder Gardens was started in 1936 as a haven for sick and injured birds and animals. Wildlife remains an important aspect of the facility, especially the alligators and crocodiles. Everglades Wonder Gardens also includes botanical gardens and a museum filled with artifacts from the region.
Drive a few miles south from Bonita Springs, and you'll come to Naples. Not so many years ago, this was a quiet little town, a winter getaway place for wealthy Midwesterners, and a summer beach playground for folks from Miami. Now Naples is all grown up, a real city, which means more of everything. Naples has always been known for great shopping, sometimes expensive shopping, and fine restaurants. Visitors should be aware that because of past influences, there is a casual elegance here, meaning you may have to dress up a bit to enter some restaurants and night spots.
While in Naples, you'll want to visit the Nature Conservancy Center, operated by the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. Check out the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, a special hospital for native wildlife. Take a guided electric boat tour through a mangrove wilderness. The center also includes a museum of natural history with lots of hands-on exhibits and a butterfly garden filled with native plants which attract more than 27 species of butterflies.
To the east and southeast of Naples lies some of Florida's wildest country, the Big Cypress Swamp and National Preserve, and the vast Everglades. Now, if you're headed to Miami and Fort Lauderdale, there are two reasons to take I-75, also called Alligator Alley: speed, or because it's the only way to get to the recently opened Seminole Indian Museum. It's called Atatiki, meaning a learning place. Take exit 14 and drive about 17 miles north, and you'll find the museum on the Seminole Reservation. Traditionally a very isolated people, the Seminoles created the museum out of a fear that if they didn't preserve their past, no one else would. The Seminoles are descendants of Creek tribes which migrated from Georgia and Alabama in the 1700s. Atatiki tells the story of this unconquered tribe, which numbers more than 2,000 today.
Back on the road, if you're in a hurry, continue east on I-75. If not, double back about 30 miles and head south on State Road 29, because there's a lot of wild country to be explored. Driving in this region, you'll notice panther crossing signs and areas of reduced nighttime speed. However, don't expect to see a Florida panther. It's believed there are fewer than 100 panthers remaining, and while this is their habitat, they generally stay away from people. The panther's a big cat, related to the Texas cougar, and several have been killed on highways late at night, hence the speed limits. If you spot one, it would be a rare sighting indeed.
Continue south on 29, cross US 41, and you'll soon arrive in Everglades City, the western border of Everglades National Park and the 10,000 Islands. Everglades has the look of a town that time forgot, but don't be deceived. Sure, the handful of restaurants close at 9, but there's plenty to do here if you're into fishing, boating, or exploring. One way to get a feel for the area is to board a Florida Boat Tours airboat and explore some of the watery fringes of the Everglades. You're sure to see some alligators and plenty of bird life. There are also sightseeing boats operating from the ranger station just south of town. These venture a bit deeper into the wild 10,000 Islands region.
Everglades City is also the western terminus of the Wilderness Waterway, a 99-mile water trail through the remote, uninhabited 10,000 islands and coastal Everglades. The waterway winds through broad bays, tidal creeks, and rivers, and sometimes the Gulf of Mexico, ending at Flamingo deep in the Everglades National Park in the Cape Sable area. It's a wondrous journey by canoe, but not for the inexperienced. Small power boats can also make the trip, but may have to divert around some of the real shallow creeks. 3 miles down the road from Everglades City, the end of the road at Chokoloskee Island. The first thing you'll see is the Outdoor Resorts Marina, a great jumping-off spot for exploration and fishing. If you're towing your own boat, you can launch it here, or you can rent one. A word of caution: if you haven't been in these waters before, take a chart and have the folks at the marina mark it for you. Don't venture too far on your first trip. This is wild, confusing country where you can go for miles or hours without seeing another boat. For a first venture, you might be better off hooking up with one of the several guides operating from the island. You won't get lost, and you will catch fish. These waters abound with redfish, snook, trout, tarpon, and several other varieties. It was mainly the fishing that attracted a hardy band of pioneers here in the 1800s. If Everglades City was a frontier, Chokoloskee was a big step beyond. It wasn't connected to the mainland by road until after World War II.
A few years ago, we hooked up with a fascinating man named Toch Brown, son of original settlers and a pioneer in his own right. Toch grew up on Chokoloskee and spent a lifetime as a fisherman, trapper, crabber, alligator hunter, gator poacher, and smuggler. Toch took us through some of the wildest country we could imagine. Not content with just talking about his life, Toch recreated life in the mosquito-infested islands, showing us how he fished for mullet, trapped raccoons, set up a camp, stalked alligators. That just looks like just a hunter's camp out in the wilderness, but you folks back in the old days actually lived in these places for long periods of time, didn't you?
Yeah, a lot of time, much as 6 months, sometimes a year in the Depression. And we'd have it fixed up a little better than this is now, but not a whole lot. But during hunting season, like for hunting coons and gators, we'd set up a camp just about similar to this. Done all of the cooking on the fire. For the coffee, we just put the grounds in there and boil it over and over.
Toch loved to tell stories, and visitors who were fortunate enough to get into a conversation with Toch got an earful about the old days.
This is mosquito bar. We call it mosquito bar. It's known as a mosquito net. And the sandflies can come through it, but the mosquitoes can't. And sandflies is always a bother. Over here's the wash tub we bathe in, and we hang stuff up in sacks. Corn sacks we use to put things in, water basin, water bucket. And this turns out pretty good. When you're tired and sleepy, you can go to sleep in there. Don't think for a minute you can't. And the good part of it, there's all kind of wildlife out there singing you to sleep.
You can stay pretty dry out of the weather in here, right?
Yeah, and there's no cars coming by or nothing else to wake you up. When you get woke up, it's by a good-sounding animal or a bird, something singing to you. Old screech owl now and then through the night. Believe me, this is a peaceful life, even though it looks terrible. But there's no way you could live that piece of a life in Miami, some big city, like you can out here in a shack like this, believe me.
Toch is gone now. The reason we brought him into this video is to illustrate what visitors can learn about an area if you can find a pioneer, an old-timer, or a descendant. Another Chokoloskee pioneer was the late Ted Smallwood. He succeeded Toch's grandfather as postmaster and ran the general store, which was the social center of the island. It's now a museum, not modernized and high-tech, but just as it was when Toch bought his supplies here.
Back on the road, head east on US 41, the Tamiami Trail, and you'll find Wootens. You can take an airboat ride here and see some different country, or ride a swamp buggy into the Big Cypress to an authentic Seminole Indian village. The Tamiami Trail is a 2-lane highway, a slower route east than Alligator Alley, but the trail isn't fenced off, so you can stop and fish in the canal, birdwatch, or picnic, and chances are good that you'll spot a gator, maybe several. Need we remind you not to try to feed them, and it's not a good idea to let dogs or children swim in the canal or even venture close to the water without supervision.
There are side roads to be explored, Indian villages to be visited, and about halfway across the state you'll become aware of the changing terrain as prairies and cypress forests give way to the sawgrass of the Everglades. It is in this area near the Miccosukee village that you'll find Shark Valley, another part of Everglades National Park. You can get a panoramic view of this river of grass and learn about the fragile ecosystem from park rangers.
See that there's still some moisture left here. It's still very soft and moist. So that algae helps to preserve the moisture here during the dry season. It even produces oxygen, and that's the fish breathe in the water. So this does a lot. You can change this algae And you can change that grass out there, that sawgrass, by adding polluted waters here. That sawgrass is replaced by a pollution-tolerant plant called cattails. Question to you, what do alligators eat? Raccoons and the alligator, when it's small, over half of its diet comes from this. What do you think apple snails eat?
Mosquitoes.
The algae, right here. That's right. So the clean water helps these animals to feed.
This is another great place to get a close-up view of alligators in the wild. While gators can be found throughout Florida, people tend to associate them with the Everglades. Most visitors to this region would be disappointed if they didn't see some gators. It seems hard to believe that this survivor of prehistoric times was nearly wiped out in modern times by hunters and poachers. Brought under state and federal protection, the alligator population made such a remarkable recovery that some limited hunting is now allowed every year.
Now, if you have somehow gotten almost to Miami and haven't seen an alligator, stop at Gator Park, where the main attractions are, of course, gators. This is a great place to get close to an endangered Florida panther, and one of the few in captivity, and experience the real Everglades in a traditional airboat, the kind Everglades hunters use.
Ready for another change of scenery? Head south on State Road 997, Chrome Avenue, and you'll pass through the Redlands, the rich farming region that supplies winter vegetables to much of the nation. Located just outside Florida City, the main entrance to Everglades National Park. Follow the winding highway south, and you'll find boardwalks, ponds, hiking trails, and places where canoes may be launched.
The road ends at Flamingo, near the very tip of mainland Florida, Cape Sable. Here, the facilities include a lodge, a restaurant, marina, and stores. You can launch your own boat here, rent a skiff or a canoe, or go fishing with a backcountry guide. The fishing for trout, redfish, snook, and other varieties is often incredible. Flamingo is also one of the few places in the region where you can rent a houseboat and experience the wild Everglades on your own. Remember the Wilderness Waterway? Well, this is the southeastern end, and you can run the houseboat as far west as the Shark River. It's a great way to spend a weekend or a week. Anchor in a secluded river or bay and catch your dinner. Then kick back and enjoy the silence, interrupted only by bird calls and feeding fish.
Just a short drive east of Florida City, another national park, much different in nature. Biscayne National Park encompasses offshore islands and part of North America's only living coral reef system. The reefs are about 10 miles offshore and easily accessible to snorkelers with their own boats or rental craft. There are also dive boats operating here, as well as a glass-bottom boat for those who prefer to stay dry while exploring the reefs.
Now let's head south into the Florida Keys, a land apart, on the map and in the mind. Take a left off US 1 onto a road less traveled, Hard Sound Road with its humpback toll bridge and rickety shacks and boats, a slice of old Florida. Or stay on US 1 for 18 miles of Everglades-like scenery. You'll know you're about to hit the Keys when you arrive at the Jewfish Creek Bridge. Hard against the bridge, a marina motel restaurant complex, now called Paradise Island, but forever known to locals and frequent visitors simply as Gilbert's.
Next stop, Key Largo. Yes, the Humphrey Bogart movie of the same name was filmed here. Just ask the folks at the Slightly Rowdy Caribbean Club. Key Largo is one of the largest and most developed of the Florida Keys, partly because of its proximity to the mainland. It's an easy weekend getaway for Miamians and Miami visitors. As such, it has big resorts and small, funky motels, gourmet restaurants, and fish shacks, marinas large and small, and dive operations everywhere. That's because the best diving in the country is found here, and right at the center of it all is John Pennekamp Coral Reef State Park. This first underwater park in the continental United States attracts divers from around the world.
Well, the eels, for one, live in an area called the Elbow, which is the north side of Pennycamp. And it's got two wrecks. One's called the City of Washington, the other one's called Mike's Wreck. And each eel sort of has a home in each one of these wrecks. So people that come out here on a regular basis will find the same eel in the same area on every day, basically. So they've wound up giving them names. And one's Melba and one's Moses, and they've been tamed down. And it's sort of fun. It makes them seem like pets, but you've got to remind people that they're really not pets. They're really wild creatures, you know, that kill other creatures for food every day. And you got to be careful with them, but giving them names just sort of makes it a little more fun.
Beneath the surface of the unusually clear water lies a wonderland of coral reefs and spectacular sea life. If you're not a scuba diver, it is possible to take a course from one of the Key Largo dive operators and get in a few dives in the course of a week's vacation. Of course, there is always snorkeling and trips are available. You'll see almost as much as the divers, and there is a glass-bottom boat operating in the park.
This reef that we're on right now, Molasses Reef, is a mile long by a half mile wide. It's only one of the many reefs that we have in this area. These are called catch reefs.
As you follow the sun along this 100-mile chain of islands, you'll find all sorts of artsy shops, specializing in nautical and Florida Keys painting, sculpture, wood carvings, even furniture.
While traversing the Keys, you'll often pass what appear to be stacks of crates right beside the highway. They may look like wooden crates. Actually, they're lobster traps. One of Florida's most popular delicacies is the spiny lobster, often called crawfish or bugs by locals. This lobster has no claws and is caught by hand by divers and snorkelers.
Just a quick hop down the overseas highway to Holiday Isle Resort. There's a full-service marina here with diving and fishing fleets and rental boats, but Holiday Isle is known throughout Florida and beyond as the party headquarters of the Keys. Most weekends, the beach and pools are jammed and the rum runners are flowing freely in several bars. Oh, there's a hotel and restaurant here too. If diving is king in Key Largo, fishing assumes royal status in Isla Mirada. From dolphin and king mackerel offshore to trophy tarpon within sight of the highway, to snook and redfish in the backcountry, the fleets at Bud and Mary's, Whale Harbor, and the smaller marinas can put you in the middle of incredible action.
Hell yeah! Woo!
A few more miles down the road, as you leave Marathon, you'll come to what was once billed as the 8th wonder of the world, the 7-Mile Bridge. The old bridge, which still stands, was built by Henry Flagler as he took his railroad to Key West. After a hurricane ended rail traffic in 1935, the bridge became part of US 1, the highway that went to sea. The old span was replaced by a new bridge several years ago, but you can still travel a part of the old structure on a tram that takes visitors the 2 miles to Pigeon Key. This National Historic Site was once a work camp for the crews building the railroad. The original buildings are still here, most have been restored, and one now serves as a museum dedicated to the incredible engineering feat represented by the 7-Mile Bridge.
Throughout the Keys, there are a number of commercial campgrounds, mostly for trailers, but 2 of the best spots are state-run. Long Key State Recreational Area, just beyond Isla Mirada, is an excellent waterside facility. The same is true of Bahia Honda Recreation Area in the shadow of an historic railroad bridge. Just past Bahia Honda, you'll start seeing signs for the Key Deer Refuge centered on Big Pine Key. You might see a key deer feeding beside US 1 if you're traveling around dawn or dusk. Any other time of day, you'll have to hang a right at Big Pine's only stoplight, drive straight ahead, and keep your eyes open. The key deer is a relative of the northern whitetail, looks exactly like one, but a fully grown key deer is barely taller than a large dog. Many of them live around homes, actually sleeping on carports and porches. Since many have grown up around people, they may be very friendly, but don't feed or touch them. That's prohibited. and obey the speed limits. Cops are tough here in their efforts to prevent key deer from being killed on the highways.
From Big Pine is just a few more minutes west to the end of the road, Key West, Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville. This little enclave in the middle of the ocean was once the wealthiest and most important city in Florida. Home at various times to Hemingway and Tennessee Williams and Audubon and Elizabeth Bishop and Harry Truman, Key West has the flavors of New Orleans, the Bahamas, Cuba, Cape Cod, and Charleston. For first-timers in Key West, the best way to get a feel for the island is with a tour on the conch train, or Old Town Trolley. You'll see the historic homes built by the wreckers who made millions, salvaging the ships that foundered on nearby reefs in the 1800s, and those built by sea captains and fishermen and cigar makers and others. The tours cover the entire island, including Duval Street with its old bars like Sloppy Joe's, t-shirt shops, far too many of them, and galleries, restaurants, and souvenir shops. Finding a place to stay in Key West shouldn't be difficult since there are few towns of this size to offer such a number and variety of accommodations. Most of the major hotel and motel chains have facilities here. If you want to combine history with lodging, you might try the Casa Marina built by Henry Flagler when he brought the railroad to Key West in 1912, or La Concha, now a Holiday Inn in the center of town. There are also numerous bed and breakfast operations located in historic homes.
You should be aware that many Key West streets and lanes are narrow and parking is difficult. So do what the locals do. Get around on a scooter or bicycle. While Key West is known as a good time town, many visitors like to soak up some history as well. There are several museums here dedicated to the city's maritime past, and among the historical homes, Hemingway House, where the famed author spent several years writing. Also the home where naturalist painter James Audubon spent time while researching bird life in the area. If you'd like to combine sightseeing with some time at the beach, visit historic Fort Zachary Taylor. The beach surrounding the fort is the best on the island. Keep in mind that all of Key West's beaches are man-made. That's because the barrier reefs surrounding the islands prevented the natural creation of sand beaches. The newest historical attraction is the Memorial Garden at the Old Mallory Docks. The garden contains busts of many of the people who played critical roles in the development of Key West. Adjoining the garden, Mallory Square, famed for its nightly sunset celebrations. It's a must-see for many visitors. Here you can watch a glorious sunset punctuated by the antics of street performers.
Cigar aficionados will want to stop at the Key West Cigar Factory, where cigars are still hand-rolled, just as they were in the 1800s when cigar making was the island's major industry. What else is there to do in Key West? How about a sunset cruise on one of the many sailing vessels operating from the old seaport, within walking distance of Duval Street and major hotels? Diving and snorkeling are also big here, with wrecks and reefs all around the islands, and plenty of dive boats operating from the port and other marinas.
In the summer, there are huge schools of glass minnows that take up residence. When the minnows are in, the game fish won't be far away. The ship itself broke in half when it was sunk, and the stern section lies about 150 yards north of the bow. The shallow depth gives you plenty of bottom time on each section and makes for a very pleasant day's dive. There are many large coral patches just north of Key West in anywhere from 10 to 30 feet of water. In the Gulf, you lose the branching corals and pick up all the encrusting corals, so any formation of rocks will eventually form a large coral patch reef or shoal, which, like a wreck, attracts its own supply of marine life. You'll find plenty of tropical fish, but the main resident is the Florida lobster. The waters around Key West are literally famous for the amount of lobster they contain, and these Gulf rock piles are very, very productive. Once you find a good patch, it's not unusual to take your limit in a few hours without even moving the boat. The best way to catch a lobster is with a net and a tickle stick. Lobsters only move backwards, so the plan is to place the net behind him, tap him on the nose with the stick, and watch him scoot backwards into the net. Once you get him, be sure to measure him in the water and make sure he's legal. If you have shorts on your boat, the Marine Patrol can make your trip very expensive. Some of the best lobstering is done in water that is less than 10 feet deep. You can usually spot their feelers sticking out from under a ledge or small reef area. We can't guarantee that you'll get your entire limit in one shot, but anything's possible in Key West.
As you explore Key West, You'll pass Charter Boat Row at the Garrison Bight Marina. That should tell you that fishing is also a major activity here. You can fish the Gulf Stream for dolphin, sailfish, wahoo, and kingfish, pull huge amberjack and grouper off wrecks, and backcountry fishing for bonefish, permit, and redfish. Perhaps the most exciting fishing of all takes place mainly in summertime, right in Key West Harbor. Tarpon, the Silver King, are usually abundant, and if you can hook one, you're in for the fight of your life. These acrobatic battlers range up to 150 pounds and can strip a light tackle reel in seconds.
In Key West, it seems like there's a festival or celebration nearly every weekend. If you want to take part in one of the wildest, you'll have to be in town around Halloween for Fantasy Fest. The crowning event is the parade down Duval Street. Reminiscent of Mardi Gras or Carnival, Fantasy Fest also has its own unique local flavor, and everybody's invited to join in.
Now it's back up the overseas highway to Miami and the Gold Coast. Before arriving in the city, there are several stops that can be made on the way north. Right along US 1 in southern Dade County, you'll find the Carl Castle. A man named Edward Leeds Scownon spent 30 years building this strangely beautiful structure as a tribute to his love for a woman. Many consider the Carl Castle an architectural wonder. How did this man manage to move and carve more than 1,000 tons of coral, mostly all by himself?
Just a few miles away, you'll find one of the world's great zoos, Miami's Metro Zoo. Here, the animals roam freely in settings designed to duplicate their own natural environments.
Not far away, the Fairchild Tropical Garden is a must-see for nature lovers. It's the largest tropical botanical garden in the continental United States, featuring rare and exotic plants, trees, and flowers from throughout the world.
There are a couple of interesting jungles nearby. Monkey Jungle, featuring monkeys and apes from around the world. And Parrot Jungle, another tropical wonderland filled with parrots, macaws, and other exotic species. All of the aforementioned attractions are within minutes of one another.
Say goodbye.
A bit farther north, in the city of Miami, right off I-95, Villa Vizcaya. Built in the early 1900s as the winter home of industrialist James Deering, the 70-room Italian Renaissance mansion and its gardens is now a county museum. Virtually all of the building materials were imported from Italy and assembled by Italian craftsmen.
Right across the street from Vizcaya, the Museum of Science and Space Transit Planetarium, a science wonderland that most kids just can't get enough of. The planetarium is famous for its laser concerts and galactic shows.
Both attractions are located at the edge of Coconut Grove, long a mecca for artists, free spirits, and more recently, the young crowd. Loaded with night spots, fine restaurants, and upscale shops, the Grove is always a fun place to visit.
Head up the road and turn right onto the Rickenbacker Causeway, and you're on your way to Key Biscayne. On the way, you'll come across the Miami Seaquarium, a longtime attraction. Lolita the killer whale, performing dolphins and seals, hungry sharks, a tank filled with exotic marine life. It all adds up to an entertainment bonanza.
A couple of miles away, Key Biscayne with its luxury hotels, miles of beaches, and Cape Florida State Park.
Back in Miami, the Magic City, many visitors are attracted to Bayside, an entertaining complex of shops, restaurants, and night spots right on Biscayne Bay.
From Bayside, it's just a short hop across the MacArthur Causeway to Miami Beach, more specifically to South Beach, the American Riviera, the in spot of the 90s. This once decaying resort area has been rejuvenated, the old Art Deco hotels restored to their 1930s glory. South Beach habitués now include jet setters, major entertainers, and supermodels here for fashion shoots. While the greater Miami area is home to major resort hotels, many visitors prefer the smaller Art Deco hotels, many of them right across Ocean Drive from the beach. And South Beach is the focal point of South Florida nightlife, where clubs rock until nearly dawn. Many don't even open until 11 o'clock at night.
Although we're generally not recommending restaurants and hotels, we can't help but mention Joe's Stone Crab, right at the tip of South Beach. It is the oldest restaurant on Miami Beach and still going strong. Be prepared to wait in line, especially during stone crab season from October to May.
Heading north from Miami, there are some incredible beaches to be found in Hollywood and Fort Lauderdale, as well as wonderful accommodations, restaurants, and attractions. Okay, our video tour of Florida is nearly over, but just in case you didn't get to see the Everglades, didn't get to catch a fish you can brag about for years to come, you might want to stop at the Sawgrass Recreation Area, west of Fort Lauderdale on US 27. Take a last shot and an airboat ride for an up-close look at alligators and birds. Better yet, hook up with an expert guide and see the gators and birds, and maybe even catch a trophy largemouth bass. What a great way to wrap up a Florida vacation.
Incidentally, if you're a sports fan, Florida offers an incredible variety. Pro football with the Miami Dolphins, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Jacksonville Jaguars. The NBA's Miami Heat and Orlando Magic. NHL hockey represented by the Florida Panthers and Tampa Bay Lightning, and Major League Baseball with the World Series champion Florida Marlins and the new Devil Rays in Tampa. College sports also abound all across the state. And if you'd like to place a small wager, you'll find horse tracks in Miami and Tampa, dog tracks in South Florida, and highlight frontons all across the state. And whether you're a scratch golfer or a duffer, you'll find more courses in Florida than most other states and plenty of tennis facilities as well.
And that's our look at FLA USA, the great state of Florida. We hope we've provided some ideas for your first or next Florida vacation.
For more information about the Sunshine State, call toll-free 1-888-7-FLA-USA or visit our website at www.flausa.com. International Video Projects, a Florida company with offices in Lakeland and Coral Gables, produces a wide variety of home videos which can be enjoyed by the entire family.